heart of Renaissance Hungary beneath the shadow of ancient castles. A name echoes through history with a whisper of dread. Countess Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess. Her legend speaks of torture chambers, hundreds of murdered girls, and the macabre ritual of bathing in virgin blood to preserve eternal youth. But here's the question we must ask. Was she truly a monster, or is her story something far more complicated? Elizabeth Báthory was born on August 7th, 1560, into one of Europe's most powerful families. Her uncle, Stephen Báthory, was King of Poland. This was a world of opulence, intrigue, and absolute authority. Educated in multiple languages, Hungarian, Latin, German, Elizabeth was no ordinary noblewoman. At just 15, she married Count Ferenc Nadasdy, known as the Black Knight of Hungary, uniting two of the kingdom's most influential houses. As a wedding gift, she received Choctice Castle, a Gothic fortress perched on a rocky hill in what is now Slovakia. While Ferenc spent years away fighting the Ottoman Empire, Elizabeth managed their vast estates with remarkable capability. She oversaw finances, agricultural production, and hundreds of servants across 17 villages. She bore 4 children. By all accounts, she was intelligent, competent, and powerful. This was her world, until everything changed. To understand what happened next, we need to grasp the chaos surrounding her. Hungary in the 16th and early 17th centuries was a fractured kingdom. After the catastrophic Battle of Mohács in 1526, the nation split 3 ways: Royal Hungary under Habsburg control, Ottoman-occupied territories, and the semi-independent Principality of Transylvania. The long war against the Ottomans raged from 1593 to 1606. This was a land of constant conflict, political intrigue, and shifting allegiances. And then, in 1604, Ferenc died, likely from illness contracted during his campaigns. With his death, Elizabeth lost a crucial layer of protection. That's when the whispers began to grow louder. Rumors had circulated for years, but now accusations mounted with alarming speed. Young women, servant girls, peasants, were said to have entered Choctice Castle and never been seen again. The charges were horrifying: torture, beatings, burnings, mutilations, murder. The estimated victim count varied wildly, from dozens to an astonishing 650. But here's where we need to pause. No comprehensive physical evidence was ever conclusively documented. The infamous list Báthory supposedly kept? Never found. On December 29th or 30th, 1610, historical sources differ on the exact date, Palatine George Thurzo, the highest-ranking official in Hungary below the king, led a raid on Choctice Castle. According to some accounts, his forces discovered evidence of recent torture, both dead and dying victims. Báthory and her closest servants were immediately arrested. Over the following months, approximately 300 witness testimonies were collected, creating a massive record of alleged crimes spanning 2 decades. Now here's where the story gets truly troubling. Not because of what happened to Elizabeth, but because of what didn't. In 1611, her servants, Dorothea Sentes, Ilona Jo, Katarina Benitska, and János Ujvári, were formally tried. They were tortured during interrogation. Their confessions were extracted under unimaginable duress, and then they were brutally executed. Some had their fingers torn off before being burned alive. But Elizabeth Báthory? She never stood trial. Her noble status protected her from the indignity of formal prosecution. Instead, she was confined to a set of rooms in Choctice Castle, with windows and doors walled up, leaving only small slits for food and ventilation. In this solitary imprisonment, she lived for nearly 4 years, until her death on August 21st, 1614, at the age of 54. Consider this stark injustice. The servants, the alleged accomplices, faced torture and execution, while the supposed mastermind was simply locked away. What kind of justice is that? Now about that blood. The most famous element of the Báthory legend, that she bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth and beauty, is also the most questionable. Here's a fact that might surprise you. This macabre detail does not appear in a single contemporary document from the 1610 to 1611 investigation. Not one witness testimony mentioned it. Not one official record documented it. This chilling image emerged more than a century later in 18th century folklore and sensationalized accounts. Over time, legend transformed history into vampire mythology, connecting Báthory to creatures of the night and the Dracula mythos. The Blood Countess became less a person and more a monster of Gothic fiction. But what if there was another story here entirely? What if Elizabeth Báthory was not a sadistic killer, but a victim herself, a victim of political machination? Consider the evidence. King Matthias II owed the Báthory family enormous debts. If Elizabeth were convicted and her estates confiscated, those debts would conveniently vanish. The Báthory family was Protestant in an increasingly Catholic-dominated Habsburg realm, creating dangerous religious tensions. And perhaps most importantly, Elizabeth was a powerful, wealthy, independent woman in a deeply patriarchal society. She was a threat. György Thurzo, though related to the family by marriage, had his own political ambitions. The witness testimonies, when examined closely, reveal significant problems. Many were based on hearsay rather than direct observation. Confessions were extracted under torture. The enormous death toll could never be corroborated by physical evidence. And here's an intriguing detail. Just before her arrest, Báthory had opened a finishing school for noblewomen at her castle. When higher-class victims entered the picture, aristocratic families finally complained, and that's when the investigation was launched. Accusations involving peasant girls had been ignored for years, but threatened the nobility? Action was swift. The legacy of Elizabeth Báthory has proven remarkably durable. Her name endures as a symbol of villainy, inspiring countless Gothic novels, horror films, and vampire legends. Choctitsa Castle itself became a dark pilgrimage site. She's often cited as history's most prolific female serial killer. Yet that claim rests on evidence modern historians find deeply problematic. Was she a monster who exploited her position to torture the powerless? Or a powerful woman destroyed by enemies who weaponized misogyny and fabricated evidence? The truth, most likely, lies somewhere in the shadows between legend and documented fact, obscured by time, by bias, and by the self-serving accounts of those who stood to gain from her downfall. In the end, the Blood Countess forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Who are history's true villains? The accused, or those who write their stories? Power, gender, and politics shape historical narrative in ways we often fail to recognize. Elizabeth Báthory's tale reminds us that the line between villain and victim can be far more complex than simple narratives suggest. So I ask you, how do we decide who becomes a villain in the stories we tell? And whose voices are we listening to when we make that judgment?